So in the last video I left it off with gluing up this entire carcass. So all this is solidly glued. There's no hardware in this whatsoever. It's all solid joints. And now I can attach the backer. If you've been following along with this series, I decided to wait until it was glued up because I was cutting these dados like you're seeing in the shot right now on the radial arm saw, and those dado joints are going to line up with all of my vertical partitions. I was a little nervous if I did this for the dry fit that once everything was glued together with all the clamping pressure, it just wouldn't line up. I'm happy I decided to wait because I had my original pencil marks on there and they were in fact a little off. Not by much, but by enough that the dados wouldn't have aligned. So I'm going to do this the same way I did the base. I could cut about 16 inches with the dado stack on this. Then I could flip it around and cut the others. And you'll see that this pretty much snaps into place, aligning with all those plywood pieces. And then I'm going to glue this in place as well. I don't always glue my backers on, especially for pieces I have to transport. But this is a very long piece of furniture, so anything to add structure to it, especially for vertical racking, is going to help, so I decided to glue it. Before I glued it all together, she wanted very specific dimensions cut in the back for plumbing. The two sections that are going to have the doors are also going to have the top part will have the sink, which means it will house all the plumbing. So easy access for the back. Could slide this right all over the plumbing, and I cut those with just a circular saw. Really easy to do it that way. You could see they line up perfectly with my compartments, and then that is what that looks like. So to start finishing up all the compartments, like I said in the first video, they're all a little different, and this center portion is going to be the hardest ones, and that's because they're the drawer boxes. Drawers are always a little bit more detail oriented and detailed to make than, say, doors. And these especially were going to be because I had to make them out of the old hardware and the old pieces from the old cabinetry. So basically you could see I'm keeping the depth because the depth of the cabinet actually got a little bit deeper. So there's going to be a little bit of a space behind it. But obviously these are like 48 inches wide. They're going to be cut down practically in half. The problem with this is the hardware on here is Blum undermount slides, which I like, but they're an older model I have no experience with. So the instructions, which I showed a little bit earlier of how to mount these, didn't work because they're actually a specialized size. I'm assuming the company has specialized slides made for them for their furniture. So luckily I have done these before, so I kind of knew the basic measurements I needed. But as you could see with that drawer, it was kind of a cheated inset style. So they weren't inset around an entire frame. They were inset around one large frame. So they really only had to have a reveal drawer to drawer. So the drawer fronts on these were rabbited in place. I didn't want to have to remake parts, so what I decided to do was do box joints on these. Sometimes I'll do dovetails. I decided to do box joints a little bit faster to cut in my shop with this jig. And then because of that, now minus that rabbet, I'm going to put a false front in this instead of sinking it into that original frame, because obviously I have to cut those down, and then the depth of those slides will still work. So this might make a little bit more sense now. Basically, I'm reusing the side panels without cutting them down to make up for the fact that a rabbet was sunk into the first part of that frame, the original teak front. I'm putting a false front on mine. So that's kind of how these Blums, at least nowadays, are designed to be installed. It's also going to make doing the inset on the teak drawer fronts that I'm cutting down a lot easier because I can detach them, tweak them, and then put them back in place. So that's basically all this is. I cut box joints on all of my fronts. The backs I'm once again keeping, which is a dado joint, and that's how I usually make my drawers. So once I have the fronts in place, I could square this up and cut down the backer. Once again, this is all recycled material from the original dresser the customer gave me, minus obviously that new 1/2-inch plywood false front. So this is the backer. I'm keeping these all the same height, everything like that. I'm just cutting new rabbets because I had to cut these down, obviously. And then that slides into the back like so. And this is my new drawer box. So like I said, the depth stayed the same, which made my life a little bit easier. It was basically just the width that I was cutting down. The height also stayed the same. The drawer boxes are going to fit the cavity a little bit better because the old cavities were much larger, but they did it so that the sides of it didn't really fill the whole cavity. So it wasn't as hard of a change as it might look like in the video, cutting all this stuff down. And then once I had that drawer box kind of rough framed out, I can measure and cut the bottoms. Once again, these are the original bottoms. I'm just cutting them down to fit the new boxes, and that's how everything fits. Now, because that front joint was a rabbet, you could see there's a little bit of void there with the box joint. I'm not overly concerned about that. I'll get plenty of good gluing surface area. These are also slides, so it's not like you're pulling these out without mechanical help, so there's not going to be as much force on this front joint as there would be if you're using something like wooden slides. And then I could glue the whole box together, so pretty simple stuff. I was a little bit nervous about cutting these down, having to recut parts, but figuring out I could use that rabbet to my advantage on the original sides really helped. And then just clamp these and let them set up. Make sure everything's square, tweak it if they're not, and then I could come back the next day and install these. So these are the clips. They're going on the bottom. Like I said, these are older style slides, so these are the older style clips. So the way that they had them mounted on the original dresser and the way that I'm doing it is they actually drilled through these top holes and attached that to the base. The more modern style, you drill, you kind of do pocket holes almost into that side there. And then this is that drawer box in place. It fit really nicely because I was working off of instructions that don't match these slides. You could see obviously it is sticking way too far out. So I just measured the offset I needed, pushed the slides back, and now you can see I can fit for my false front. The way I mounted the rest of these was basically the slides just had to line up with the face frame. So working my way up, I just cut a scrap piece of material. I could set the slides on it. I know how far they have to be set back now because I did my bottom set and got it perfect. And then I could just attach the sets going up. That's another one of the reasons I like to do nice solid sides. When you're attaching hardware like this, you can attach them to the back of the cabinet, but that wouldn't have worked in this circumstance because as you could see, these drawer boxes are not as deep as my cabinet. And then those are the 3 boxes in place. That's what they look like. And now I'm going to go through and measure my frame opening. I was lucky they were all roughly about the same size, and I'm going to be putting reveals on them so I could cut them all down to the same size. I do have this, you can see this is what I was talking about. That is where the rabbet for the original drawers went. That was the one part that kind of got messed up, breaking up the drawers, because obviously that was glued in place. I can't remember if I filmed it. I haven't edited that far, but I do end up patching that so you don't notice it. But these drawer fronts, like I said, I'm roughly cutting these down by about half. So I cut those down to fit, and then I cut them down to size. She wanted to change out the hardware on these, so that luckily this design made it so that the old hardware holes were cut, so now she could start anew. Now the way I like to do this is I cut it to just about fit in my opening, and then from there I mark my reveals based on my opening. I do this because chances are these are not going to be perfectly 90 degrees. Mine are very close. You can see the top and the bottom are fine from where I marked my pencils, but on this one side, not this one, the other side, it is a hair off, like less than a degree off up top. So I went through, all I do is from the edge of that frame, I mark what reveal I want. Since these are solid wood panels, which I don't do these a lot of times I'm using a composite, especially for the false fronts, so you don't really have to worry about seasonal movement as much. But because these are solid wood, and I want to mention that because they're a little bit thicker than the reveals I normally do, I put these at almost 1/8 of an inch. They're a little bit of a heavy 3/32. So that was the reveal I calculated. On the table saw, because the top and the bottom are square, I just ripped the drawer box down to size. And then on the miter saw, like I said, it was less than a degree I had to change it to get that cut. I used my bevel gauge to find the degree, transferred it to the miter saw, and then cut those two sides. So that's how I did it. Sometimes for these inset panels I use pennies, because pennies are about a perfect 1/16 of an inch, and when I'm working with plywood, that's usually the reveal I stick to roughly. But because, like I said, this is a thicker reveal, I pulled out the playing cards, which work really well because you could kind of use each single card. You could really dial in that reveal. I get everything set to where I like it. It looked pretty good at this point. And then I'm going to attach these with double-sided tape. This is the way I do it. I find it to be one of the easier ways to do it. Attach it with double-sided tape. Because I can get to this from the top, I guess I could have screwed this in place that way, but the tape really holds everything in place. Sometimes without the tape, things want to move around on you. I have 4 pieces of tape on there. I could put my cards back in place and then slap this front onto the drawer box, pop it out. And what you don't see, because I thought sometimes with these videos, I think I film stuff and I don't, or I press the wrong button. But basically I'm going to take these out, and I just countersunk 4 screws from the plywood into the face, and that is enough to hold it in place. Double-sided tape is thin enough. I just leave it there. I don't even bother taking it off. It's kind of added reinsurance to hold it in place. And she did not decide on what handle she wanted for these, which is fine by me. I'd rather people take their time to decide what they want than rush a decision and not like it. So throughout this video, and even when I installed it, blue tape is going to be how I open all of these. So then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other faces. At this point, it's also important to pay attention to the reveal you made on the first one. So especially looking at the sides, I just want to make sure it's the same thickness up and down, because your eye will catch that as well. So you're not only looking at the reveal for the box you're working in now, but you're looking at the reveal for the box below. And then you can see I use marks on the corners to make sure that the box stays the way I need it to be. On this one, even though I pushed into place, you could see when I moved the playing cards, kind of tilted the box forward, which is sometimes an issue when you have all this weight on the false front. But the nice thing about these slides, even the older version is they do have an adjustment on the front to tilt it back. So I was able to do that without a problem. This is obviously the lash drawer front going in place. Exact same process, following it up and then attaching it with screws as well. And then that is what that looks like. Next video should be the last one for this series. It was a long one, but I should be able to wrap it up in one video. I'm going to be using the old tops from the dresser to start making the doors on the other side.